A warm welcome to everyone to this series of videos on an issue that's going to be increasingly debated nationally. So I've envisaged a series of 6 short videos on the issue of Uniform Civil Code, which has been abruptly introduced by the Prime Minister. And it is expected or it is anticipated that legislation in this regard might happen quite soon. As everyone knows, we don't have a draft bill in this context. The idea has been floated all of a sudden, almost like floating a trial balloon, and high-pitched discussions have begun. And very often, in the heat of such discussions, the essence of a topic, the heart of the matter, is lost sight of. And therefore, I'm doing this presentation in order to keep us well grounded in this very important national debate, which I believe will have serious consequences, long-term consequences for the health and wholeness of Indian democracy, as well as the sense of belongingness that especially religious minorities would experience in the days to come. So let me give a broad title to my presentation. As I said a short while ago, it's a series of 6 videos. If I were making a presentation to an academic community, I would have done it in one go. But as a concession to the limitations of human patience on social media, I've decided to break this into 6 different smaller units, therefore 6 videos. And I commend these videos to you, requesting that you follow up each of these videos with involvement and attention so as to arrive at a clear and comprehensive understanding of the spiritual issues, the spiritual implications of this debate, which I'm sure will not be articulated by most people. So let's get started. As of now, when I do this video, and this is done on the 2nd of July 2023, a spirited political, almost communal discussion is raging on this topic. Now, my perspective, I have to clarify at the outset, is essentially spiritual. If my perspective were only political, I would be merely repeating what others are articulating, perhaps with greater conviction, competence, and persuasiveness that I'm capable of. So I'm articulating the spiritual perspective for the main reason that it is not adequately emphasized. It's not even really reckoned at the present time. Maybe the quality and substance of the debate will change, but I'm doing this at a time when it has not happened, and therefore please accept this as my small contribution to preserving the desired balance in the national debate between politics and spirituality, because after all, this is an issue which has both political and spiritual ramifications. Now, after all, this issue is about identity. Uniform Civil Code. If you ask me, and I'm not saying anything new or unprecedented, the ultimate point of reference in Uniform Civil Code is identity. And to what extent should religious minorities, linguistic minorities are not particularly under the scanner here. To what extent should religious minorities be allowed to preserve their distinct identity? And does the preservation of this distinct religious identity, or the preservation of distinct identities, run counter to the sense of national cohesion and unity? This is the issue. So, this issue can be, as I said, packaged purely in a political manner, but I would argue that that would be very, very insufficient, as well as inadequate and inappropriate. Now, while the media discussion on this topic is bound to be political, and I would say politico-communal. It is a duty of the Christian community to stay focused on the spiritual dimensions or spiritual overtones or implications of this topic, as well as articulate it in order to enrich the national debate, which has just begun. So let's remind ourselves once again that there is no draft law. We really do not know what exactly is envisaged. But even if we don't have the draft legislation before us, nothing prevents us from examining the various aspects of this massive issue, massive momentous issue, and therefore it is right and proper that a discussion or a national debate begins. Now, as I said at the outset, I'm dividing my presentation into smaller units, and this has a disadvantage. The disadvantage is that by the time we come to the third unit, what was said in the first unit could be forgotten. By the time we come to the sixth unit, what was presented in the first 5 units could be forgotten. Therefore, my viewers will have to take extra pains to see them in sequence and assume responsibility for maintaining the nexus between the various units. After all, these units should have formed part of the same presentation, but on social media, patience and span of attention being what it is, I've had to resort to this very somewhat unpleasant and inconvenient or unhelpful remedy. Now, let me at the outset raise an issue. Now, I said a short while ago that the ultimate point of reference in this Uniform Civil Code is identity. So, continuing from there, let me now ask a question. And this question I'm asking with specific or rather exclusive reference to the Christian community. Can we honestly ask ourselves this question? Who among us is really, really bothered about our identity as a faith community, the Christian community? What is the indication that we are really seriously concerned? We can all get carried away by the sensationalism of it. We can all have a superficial, kind of vague, blurred notion, mainly because of what others have said. My disappointment often when issues are discussed in my community is that people do not study issues in their specific detail. Therefore, either they are ill-informed, or if they are informed at all, their knowledge or familiarity with the subject is vague, nebulous, and therefore no sensible debate or sharing of view happens in our community. And I hope this changes, and very likely the debate on the Uniform Civil Code could provide an opportunity for making a good beginning in this regard. So let's ask ourselves, to what extent are we really mindful of our identity as Christians? And what is the proof that we are mindful of our identity? One thing is very obvious. Being mindful of our identity as Christians or as a faith community cannot coexist with being indifferent to what's happening within as well as to our community. And I dare say that most people are indifferent and apathetic, and yet even they would get worked up about this question of the Uniform Civil Code. I'm not saying that they should not. I'm only saying that there's a right opportunity for us to wake up to the fact that we are not meaningfully concerned about what constitutes the essence that constitutes our identity, our spiritual identity as Christians, and how best we can be responsible stewards of this identity. So, now let me here sound a note of warning. When such issues come, what I've seen in the past invariably is that the priestly class within the Christian community suddenly wakes up, and priests and bishops instigate the faithful, the flock that follow them faithfully, the sheep that follow them faithfully, and then put in their minds as to what they should be saying, what stand they should be adopting. Now, here I have to sound a note of warning. With what little historical sense I have, particularly the history of religion, I have to say that in the past at least 2000 years or more, whenever the priestly class has incited the common folks, ordinary people, the believers, invariably it was to use them as instruments to protect the vested interests of the priestly class. You cannot point out a single exception to this pattern. Well, consider the most obvious of it all, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which Christians are familiar with, therefore I can use it without offering any apologies. Ask yourself, why did the crowd bay for the blood of Jesus? Crucify him, let his blood come upon us and our children and their children. Why did they do that? Was it because Jesus heard their agenda? Was it because Jesus really provoked them? Each one of them perhaps was a beneficiary of Jesus' public ministry. They were inordinately grateful to him. In fact, there is an occasion in which the people come and they want to make Jesus their king by force. If you want to see that episode, please read the 6th chapter of John's Gospel. Such was Jesus' popularity. You have large crowds attending to him, listening to him, forgetting their own hunger. It is Jesus who becomes aware of their hunger. Such was the degree of Jesus' popularity. Wherever he went, there were crowds just milling around him. He was incomparably popular. But overnight it all changes and the same people begin to bay for the blood of Jesus. How does that happen? Or how did that happen? Just one thing, instigation by the priestly class. And look at the atrocity in which the ordinary people get involved because they allowed themselves to be led by the nose by the priests of the times. The same thing is going to happen now. Priests and bishops are going to instigate their congregations and members of the Christian community, and many of them are going to be taken and they'll come out and blurt things which they don't understand. I'm not saying that we should not be vigilant or we should not really take a stand. I'm only saying that each one of us has a duty to be intellectually honest. We must advocate only what we seek, find, and understand. On the basis of that, on the basis of personal conviction, based on personal understanding, we must take a stand and pursue it vigorously. So, let's be clear that this is not the occasion for us to be used as tools by the priests and bishops of our community. And therefore, in the days ahead, ordinary Christians are going to need a lot of discernment. And this is something that Jesus emphasizes in our relationship with the world around us. In the 10th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, as Jesus sends the disciples out on their missions, he tells them, "Behold, I sent you like sheep among wolves, therefore be as innocent as the dove and as subtle as the serpent." We need to be subtle. And subtlety comes only through thinking factually, and thinking in a very concentrated manner. So the first thing I want to do with respect to the community, my community, is to urge every member of my community to be willing to think, to seek, to understand, and understand the subtleties of this issue, and then take a stand. So otherwise, we could, out of our very enthusiasm, be promoting a cause that will do us enormous harm. And I have to make a reference here, though I don't want to be critical of any other community. I'm afraid the Muslims played the most unenlightened role in relation to the Babri Masjid issue, Ram Janmabhoomi issue, and the greatest irony of Indian history. No one has ever talked about it. Let me mention it now. This is the opportune time for me to make a mention. The greatest irony in the history of India ever will be that BJP came to power because of a person called Mir Baki, who was an army leader with Babur. Had he not destroyed, as per what is alleged, had he not destroyed the Ram temple standing there and erected a Muslim mosque in its place, I doubt if BJP would ever have come to power. Such are the ironies of history, and I make a mention of it only to warn my community that we need a lot of historical insight, a lot of spiritual discernment. Do not be naive, do not be foolish, do not allow yourself to be used as mindless tools by others. Now, also, you will be told a great deal about the great threat that's going to unfold in the days ahead to the integrity and solidity, the inviolability of our identity as Christians. Christianity is under attack. The Christian community is under attack. All these slogans you're familiar with. But then, the concern for protecting and preserving our identity must definitely involve, and this is something I'm going to argue in the succeeding presentations as well, must be coupled with a genuine commitment to understanding and enunciating the true essence of Christian identity. What does it mean to be a Christian? Of course, in a very facile manner, we say that a Christian is one who follows Jesus Christ, or one who believes that Jesus is his Savior. But the further question arises, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus Christ? What does it mean to be saved? If you are saved, how does it become manifest? As Jesus said, you shall know a tree by its fruits. So what is the fruit of salvation that we are manifesting both as individual believers and as a community, placed in the midst of the most diverse, religiously plural society in the world? India is unique in this respect. No other country can come anywhere near us, the sort of religious, cultural, linguistic diversity that we are blessed with. So Jesus, looking at the Jewish community of his days, he said, as salt, the salt that loses its saltiness will be cast out and trampled underfoot by men. This is extremely important. You will find that in the 13th verse of the 5th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. You are the salt of the earth. If the salt loses its saltiness, wherewith shall it be salted again? It can only be thrown out and cast underfoot by men. Now, this is really the issue. Are we truly the salt of the earth? If we are the salt of the earth, rest assured we have nothing to worry about. Believe you me, no human being, no culture, no civilization, no political party will ever say that the salt is irrelevant. But they will certainly say that the salt that has lost its saltiness must be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Look at the amazing historical vision of Jesus Christ, something that the Christians are nowhere near to. And this is the time for us to wake up to this fact, that ultimately the decisive factor is not what Modi wants to do, or what the Sangh Parivar advocates, or what V. S. Savarkar wrote in 1923, or what Vinay Damodar Golwalkar wrote in The Bunch of Thoughts and We Are Nationhood Defined, etc. That's not the decisive issue. The decisive issue is the substance of our own spiritual life, the truth of our community as a Christ-centric fellowship of people, or to use the metaphor Jesus himself has given us, which we can't outperform, whether we are the salt with its saltiness or the salt that has lost its saltiness. If we are the salt that has its saltiness, don't worry about it. But at the same time, don't relax, don't become indifferent, don't become complacent, but don't worry. Not worrying does not mean becoming complacent and indifferent. Not worrying means being able to stand on one's feet and be able to face emerging situations without fear, without panicking, and dealing with every issue according to the truth of one's own identities, one's own spiritual resources, so that each crisis becomes really an opportunity to prove one's spiritual mettle. So, this is really the challenge that's emerging at the moment, and I'm glad that this challenge is emerging, because it's going to give us unprecedented opportunities to prove who we are. And it's also going to confront us with dangerous situations where we could be exposed pathetically. Now, I'm coming to the close of this introductory unit, and let me do that by making a very brief reference to the context in which this national debate is going to unfold. It's amply clear that Modi's purpose in abruptly reviving the Uniform Civil Code issue which the 21st Law Commission very emphatically and explicitly stated is an issue that should not be handled. It says it is neither necessary nor desirable. That's what the Commission report says. It's neither necessary nor desirable to implement the Uniform Civil Code now, but perhaps disappointed with the finding of that commission, which was chaired by a very senior judge of the Supreme Court of India. The Government of India appointed the 22nd Law Commission with a mandate to come out with a rushed post-haste report. And even before the report hits the stands, the Prime Minister has actually jumped the gun and introduced this theme or this national priority to enunciate the Uniform Civil Code in a precipitous manner. So obviously, this move is purely political, and Modi and his camp have their eyes clearly on the two major assembly elections towards the end of this month and the general elections that will happen early next month. So this is not a religious move, it's a purely political move, it's a communal move, and we have to really understand it as such so that the strategies we adopt, the measures we adopt must be accordingly, so that the hidden pitfalls may be avoided. I'm not saying that we should be communal in our response. I'm only saying that we should be able to understand this in perspective so that we regulate our responses accordingly. So this is quite similar. The sudden introduction of the UCC agenda, the Uniform Civil Code agenda, is almost identical to the issue of including the Métis in the scheduled tribe bracket of privileges, which sort of made Manipur burn. Now, obviously, whether it is intended in that manner or not, I don't know. But the way the judge proceeded with this is quite intriguing. I'm not no one to comment on that. I don't want to. But the fact of the matter is that it has effected a permanent polarization between the Kukis and the Métis, which is also a communal polarization because the Kukis are predominantly Christian, the Métis are predominantly Hindus, though there's a lot of intermarriage between the two tribes. By and large, these are two camps, Hindu camp, Christian camp, and this polarization on the basis of religion is supposed to ensure the victory of the BJP and the stranglehold of the BJP on the state of Manipur forever and ever, exactly like how Gujarat has been annexed forever and ever through the 2002 communal conflict. So on this, I close the first unit of the 6 video series on Uniform Civil Code and the national debate that's already begun and is bound to pick up momentum. See you soon with the next unit of our analysis.